Lord Seventh, is a priest novel. This is an audiobook made by fans for other fans. Disclaimer. The main couple of the story is made up of two men. If you don't like it, don't listen. Thank you. Remember, subscribe and click the bell to stay updated on all the new releases. Enjoy. Chapter 18. Strictness in the Prince Estate. Jing-Chi had a flash of lucidity. Reacting quite speedily, he reached out and lightly waved his hand before Wuxi's eyes, only to find that he had merely opened his eyes and was not truly awake. The focus in them wasn't too accurate. After saying that sentence that made Jing-Chi's heart skip a beat, his head listed to the side, and he became delirious once again. On the eve of daybreak, the sable was sleeping at Wuxi's side, sprawled out on its back. Jing-Chi, on the other hand, was evaluating a light blue robe that Ping An had entrusted someone with delivering. His tiredness completely vanished. A head full of white hair, sitting beside the three-life rock. He had roamed the Yin world for a few hundred years and still had some knowledge of its rules. Freshly made souls couldn't enter it, for example. For another example, those dead spirits that once passed him by had all drunk Mengpo's soup, as well as gotten washed clean and ignorant by the waters of forgetfulness, so they absolutely wouldn't remember seeing him sit upright at the rock. That's why, in Wuxi's previous lifetime, if he wasn't a ghost messenger, then he had to be a soul hook envoy. In a flash, he recalled what the man had said at the pool of rebirth: "Your destiny was ruined with me as the cause, and such, reversing yin and yang was a violation of natural law." Did he seriously give up all of his cultivation for it? Jing-Chi lightly raised his hand to briefly touch against the space between his brows, as if a trace of blood still remained there. Only after a long while did he come back to his senses, then sit at the bedside, gazing with a complicated look at the feverish youth lying there. "That was a forced purchase, but I still ultimately owe you a favor." He gently stroked Wuxi's hair, thinking that the ways of the world were truly mysterious. They had met down in the Yellow Springs, yet he was still able to come across him again within this endless sea of people. His wide sleeve fell down, swiping against the sable. It opened its eyes in alert, but upon seeing it was him, it shut them again, curling up into a ball of fur, arching up to be inside of his sleeve, and going to sleep. He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "In other words, I still remember our involvements of the previous life. In this life, I'll do all I can to keep you safe." He scrunched his brows, sized Wuxi up once like he was being fussy about something, then curled his lip. "Stubborn little brat. Tell me, if I don't look after you in the future, how long would you be able to live with that donkey temper of yours?" Wuxi rarely experienced fevers. He felt like acid was permeating outward from all the cracks in the bones of his body, and his dreams were a chaotic cloud, leaving him absolutely unable to remember what had happened. During the times his consciousness was a bit clearer, he could vaguely sense that there was someone next to him, which terrified him. In his weakness, he brimmed with wariness at everything surrounding him. He wanted to open his eyes to see who was there, as well as gather up all the power in his body to doggedly prop himself up. Yet, that someone had an especially nice smell, faint, refreshing, and a bit sweet. There was a warm hand perpetually placed on his head, very gentle and very soft. Bizarrely, Wuxi slowly relaxed. It could have been that the fever made him slightly irrational, or that his body was too worn out, but he actually developed some sort of illusion of safety from being together with this person. It was like he was a young animal that had penetrated through a forest with mortal danger hidden in every direction. Returning to his cave deep underground, he could spend the whole lengthy night with his eyes shut, engaging in a dream about warmth. By the time the fever had thoroughly subsided and he had woken up, the day was already bright. As soon as he opened his eyes, he caught sight of a slender hand with its palm facing upwards placed before his eyes. Half of the sable's body was crowded into the sleeve of the other's blue robe, which was tied loosely around him. Jing-Chi was half leaning on the headboard, head tilted to the side with a strand of his hair having fallen loose, which went past his chin to settle on his chest, its tip seeming to slightly drift in the wake of his breaths. Wuxia stared blankly for a time, as if he had never gotten to know this teen before. Pitch black eyes widening, he carefully took a measure of him. He thought that he was pretty good looking, and of how he was the one that had kept him company all of yesterday night, and of why when they had come across an assassination last night, he wasn't afraid, and didn't flee. He thought of how, during his entire 5 years of this world ever since he came to the Great Qing, this teen was the only friend he had met. Therefore, he couldn't help but softly smile, lightly closing his eyes. When he came to once more, Jing-Chi had since left. The latter had slumped there for a while, the doze just about enough to regain some of his energy, then picked up the sable who was stuck headfirst in his sleeve, explained things to Ashenli, and returned to his own estate. After all, there was still some proper business he had to take care of. Ping An welcomed him in person, presented the roster of the estate's servants, and informed him that everyone indicated on it had been assembled in the courtyard to wait. Jing-Chi swept his gaze over the list, then passed it back to him, a slight smile at the corner of his lips as he strode into the front courtyard. Ping An, normally fond of making a bit of noise, was also silent, his head lowered. He suddenly felt that the very instant the junior prince stepped through the entrance, he appeared to have transformed into a different person. That lazy air that seemed to grow in his bones, carried with him all year round, was now like a layer of disguising skin that could be easily unmasked. It was the same face, so it naturally couldn't be described as harsh, but when its eyes gingerly passed over someone else's face, it made them feel a chill along their spine. Just like a lethargic and quiet cat, once he woke up, he suddenly turned into a tiger coldly observing its prey. Ping An thought to himself that if their master looked like this on the regular, then based on his own level of courage he wouldn't have dared to chatter on and on without cease in the prince's presence. Jing-Chi stood before the crowd, but didn't look at them, merely hanging his head a bit to inspect the ground. Ping An promptly relocated the lounge chair he sat on every day and invited him to sit on it. Taking a seat, Jing-Chi casually crossed one leg over the other, then placed his folded hands in his lap. With a small smile, he gazed enigmatically at the people filling the courtyard. Yesterday evening, His Highness the Crown Prince sent someone to inform you all that this prince was outside with the chaminette. Yes, Ping An responded in a low voice. His Highness stated that you were taking a stroll, Master, so he instructed us slaves to prepare hot water for a change and wash along with other such things, and to wait for you to come back to attend to you. Jing-Chi nodded. That was standard, there was no need to speak of any prince estate, as for even an ordinary land-owning capital family, were their master not to bring servants along for menial tasks and others discovered the reason why he went out by himself, it would be utterly beneath his status. Helian Yi had already succinctly taken the blame for him yesterday. Within the Great Qing's aristocratic circle, emphasis was placed on gentleness, slowness, stability, a lack of martiality, and a lack of anger. Gentleness was to have an intellectual bearing, a delicate physique, and a soft and weak voice when speaking, carrying a slight feel of being deficient in energy and blood. This was having the mannerisms of an elegant person. Slowness referred to a pure and noble person that walked their path unhurriedly, and rode their horse at no faster than a leisurely pace. This was having culture. Stability then meant that someone of rank had to remain aloof when encountering incidents, not showing sorrow, joy, nor anger on their countenance. This was having status. Also emphasized was that the sons of noble families should not practice martial arts, as that was the art of boorish savages, and should not let rage color their face nor quarrel with others, as that was stooping to the level of the hoi polloi. Naturally, the above-mentioned standards that advocated being a sickly plum blossom were, in fact, just a few songs that distinctly fostered the customs of wastrels and pretiboys that couldn't shoulder any weight. Helian Yi handled this according to the methods of high-ranking officials. Families having bumped into a noble junior without servants following him, he sent someone towards his household to report that he was safe, sound, and being looked after, with the intention of letting those at home be at ease. Jing-Chi took a sip of tea out of Ping An's hand, pursing his slightly dry lips. "Hey, what are you all standing here for? What, do you want me to give you New Year's money?" The crowd had been called to gather here early in the morning, not one of them knowing what was going on. Upon hearing the master say that there was nothing wrong, they all let out relieved sighs. Ji Xiang was witty, but at this juncture, he couldn't tell whether his mood was good or bad from observing his expression, so he tried to sound him out. "Master, how to properly repay the gifts given by each gentleman has been compiled into a record by the slave and the steward, then placed into your study. Will you take a look at it in a bit?" "I won't," Jing-Chi replied. "There's piles and piles of that stuff. Looking at it hurts my brain." Ji Xiang nodded and affirmed. "You see, in the early morning, the steward called for everyone to come here, and we didn't know what was happening. Now that you've returned, master, we can be relieved. Everyone may scatter to go and do whatever work they should be doing." Jing-Chi nodded. "Mn. If you're busy with something, hurry and go do it, yeah." They all exchanged looks, a bit confused, yet went to disperse. However, right at that moment, they heard the Lord casually start to speak up again. "But if you're not busy with something, there's no harm in staying to listen to this prince tell a joke. Let's talk about last night. Do you all know which few people this prince had run into with the chaminette then?" Even Ping An didn't know this. The people that had come over from the chaminette estate only said that it had gotten too late, so the prince was staying the night over there. Hearing his instructions, Ping An knew that something had definitely happened in the interim, but he wasn't clear on the specifics of what that was. Jing-Chi smiled, his eyes sweeping a whole circle around the congregation, every single one of them getting a "he's looking at me" type of illusion. Then, they heard him say, "I ran into a couple of assassins that weren't watching where they were going." Ping An startled, his slender eyes instantly widening into two circles. "An assassination attempt? Master, are you hindered? Injured? Do you want word passed on to a royal doctor?" Jing-Chi took the tea bowl from his hands, lifting its lid to take a sip. "No need, don't make a big fuss out of a little thing. It was only a few southern barbarians called black shamans or something, and they were killed easily." When he said the words "killed easily," his tone got all the more gentle, but it brought with it a bloody aura that made one tremble. By coincidence, the sable dug its way out of his sleeve. The little guy had been splashed with blood the day before, but there had been no time to wash it off. Half of its body was mottled with it, and, paired with its shiny eyes, it was somewhat bizarre and intimidating. A few of them weren't brave and already felt their legs going soft, thinking to themselves that this guy and his face had changed too rapidly, having been breezy and drizzling just recently. They didn't know what this meant. "On our side here, there is a brother of great skill," Jing-Chi continued. "Once he received the news, He immediately thought that this was a rare opportunity, so he busily went to tell his, master. Unexpectedly, he didn't meet this master, but the master's godson, instead. He chuckled, everyone else on the scene being quiet birds, and blew on the steam in his tea bowl. They hadn't said anything, but it was rather a few brothers below them that couldn't sit still, and those surprisingly came to assassinate someone at this occasion. After prancing about for a lap, they had no other gains than a few of their people dead, on top of letting this prince get reacquainted with quite a greatly influential person in our estate. He suddenly raised his head, his lightning-like gaze staring straight at a single person, and smiled. "Why, you've ruined His Second Highness's affairs. Even I'm worried for you. Are you really that carefree?" Before he finished, the man who was standing in the corner, covered in grime with shoulders hunched, abruptly appeared to change face. He launched himself extremely nimbly at Jing-Chi, during which the crisp sound of his bones creaking was heard several times. Looking at him again, how could this man still be that lean, small, cowering old man Zhang that swept the courtyard? This was clearly a big, burly man with the back of a tiger and the waist of a bear. In desperation, Ping An threw the teapot he held, aiming to smash it on the big man's skull. "Assassin," he shouted to the side. "Protect the prince." The man dodged, crooking his fingers to go clasp Jing-Chi's neck. The change in circumstance was too fast, the Imperial Guards unable to react in time. Right when he was about to touch down, however, a squeak was heard, and the man was seen abruptly taking a big step back, letting out a blood-curdling shriek as he desperately shook his hand. The sable speedily hopped back up to Jing-Chi's shoulder, standing with its tail swinging in a show of its glorious power and might. The big man's hand had already gotten a swath of purple on it. The purple chi moved upwards quickly, climbing his entire arm in no time flat. Jing-Chi was a bit surprised, inclining his head to peer at the sable that was licking its paws. "You're this ferocious?" The underestimated sable showed its teeth in a grin. Squeak. Jing-Chi smiled, turning his head back around. The guards had already captured the man and were pushing him onto the floor, but he didn't have time left to wrangle with them, merely holding his arm that had gotten several times thicker while he hollered sorrowfully. He couldn't even form a whole sentence, as the purple chi was climbing along his neck, and honking sounds came from his throat. Jing-Chi stroked his chin. "How much longer do you think he can hold on?" he asked Ping An. Due to the series of unforeseen events, Ping An had been scared into speechlessness, and it took a long time until he pointed at the man that had since been cramping up on the ground. This is Uncle Zhang." Jing-Chi reached out and patted his shoulder, waving with his other hand. All disperse, all disperse. Ping An, go and have the accounts office give everyone a red envelope each. Just say that I said it's for adding good omens in the new year." Saying so, he walked towards his study. Ping An rushed to catch up with him. "Master, Ch18 that." He pointed at old man Zhang, who was no longer moving, glanced at him, then twisted his head back around as if he had suffered a fright. "That Uncle Zhang, what do I do?" Not pausing in his steps, Jing-Chi ordered, "Burn the body, but take off the clothes first. Fold them up, iron them out, and send them off together with the second scion's gift later on." Ping An was wide-eyed and dumbstruck. Considering the quality of this spy, it was obvious that Helian Chi hadn't been attaching much importance to Jing-Chi before. He smiled lightly. "I didn't want to provoke you, but all of this was your own misdoing. Looks like this time, we'll just have to wait and see what happens." End of the chapter. Stay tuned for more BL.